Okie dokie. So, I'm Jonna,
And I'm Nalita, and
and
we're
we're
not
not
crazy.
crazy. This is the show where we dive into everything. Um, oh my gosh,
He's
neuro.
blanking.
Yeah, I'm blinking. Neurodiverse. Where we focus on ADHD and autism. More of, but we like to. We're gonna dig into different things. Last week, we not last week. 2 weeks
Whenever the last time, it doesn't
whenever the
matter.
last episode we were just diving into generally what being not neurodivergent means. We're gonna go and focus on more details,
Yeah.
deeper into things. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But I mean, just before we just dive and get to the heavy stuff. Well, it's all heavy stuff sometimes. It's both. It can be
Mhm.
heavy and it can be light. Where this is the dichotomy of these things. But I was in kind of doing the research on this subject matter, and what we're talking about is self awareness as a whole,
Mhm.
because before that, you're not going to even seek out anything, even a diagnosis. There's got to be something that drives us to say something is not quite right. Something's
How are
not
you supposed to
clicking.
solve a problem if you're
Right.
not aware of it?
So for you, like when you think back to before you even there was a conversation, before you had even heard anything with myself or even any of the children in our family with who have been diagnosed with a couple of with these neurodivergences,
Hmm.
what was your thoughts in your social interactions while you were growing up? Because I know that you had experiences. We've talked about it.
Yeah. Well, as far as being self-aware, I wasn't totally conscious in that way.
Right,
Because like I look like any other person. It's not like I have some visible disability or
right,
something that everybody can see and it's like, okay, yeah, clearly I'm a little different.
right.
So I always felt a little off, but being aware of what it was exactly, I assumed I was just always awkward and just couldn't formulate words and sentences the way
So,
everybody else did.
did you always feel like it was you, or was it other people that were like when you could see the disconnect? Did you think, oh, they're the ones like, what's up with them? Or did you think it must be
It's
something going on with me?
it's always been like two sides of the coin to me. Like there's something wrong with these people, but I'm like everybody else seems to think there's nothing wrong with them, so it must be me.
Right. And
you
so
know?
so some of those instances when you would think about yourself, it would be when you felt like people kind of knew what was going on that you kind of didn't catch on to.
I'm sure there's people that have looked at me and it's like, nah, there's something different about it. It's like when you see the face, what's wrong with you face.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've honestly felt that more often than not,
And you can
especially
remember
growing
as
up.
far back as
My whole life.
forever.
Like even like I can remember snippets of being in like just kindergarten and feeling weird and like a kid would come and play with me and I'd be like, and do what? I'm doing this by myself. I was making a castle. I was just fine.
Right, right. And they're trying to get in there and you're like,
You over here trying to
go
shove
away,
yourself
kid.
into it. I'm like, what are you doing?
And just to, the funny part about that, I would tell you, so this is my youngest child. And so the other three, definitely diverse in those ways. My two boys, very rambunctious, very, you know, active all over the place. And then the oldest daughter, super chatty, high
Social butterfly.
energy, but high energy. They were all like, eh, eh, eh. And then this one comes and she is like, she plays by herself for extended periods of time. And, at first I'm like, that's weird, because I'm an only child. So I always wanted to be around kids and stuff like that. But she could do it. I bet I'd go check on her, like, you okay?
Look
She'd
like
be
a
this. I'm like, what
well-behaved
you
little
doing?
angel.
Oh, I'm just blah, blah, blah. And she'd tell me what she was doing. I'm like, okay, weirdo. No, I'm just kidding.
That's
No.
an accurate description.
Nah.
But over time I just said, okay, she's got to do her, and she was very, I mean, the girl drew early. When I say drew, like at 2 years old, me and the producer, you remember this argument that we had about the Powerpuff Girl drawing? And what the argument was whether or not she drew it or traced it. Now remember, she's like 2.5 years old. So we're arguing. Tracy was saying she traced it. I said she drew it.
I remember
And
drawing
then I
it.
finally said, but even if she traced it at that age, that would have been like phenomenal. But she did draw it. And it was a Powerpuff Girl that you could look at and say, wow. So that was already mind blowing. But her dad, my husband, he is an artist. So I'm like, maybe that's the way that works. But just things, and over time, and I couldn't understand why she didn't want to be social. I tried to have birthday parties and she was like, nah, I just want to hang out with family. And I'm like,
It was never like that. Was never really me. And I saw how other people, like I told you before, like as a kid growing up, I'd see other kids, cha 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 cha, and I'd be like, what the fuck is they talking about? I have no idea. Like, I have no idea what to say. If somebody came up to me and said, I like your shirt, it just ends at thanks.
it's not going to go into a conversation about whatever's on the shirt. Right.
Bye. I'm going to continue doing what I'm
And
doing.
the funny part, so in contrast to that, and I say that because this is where we started talking about the autism piece. Because, like me, just with ADHD, I was both the social butterfly, but then I did feel also awkward in a lot of ways. But a lot of times I thought it was them, it's them folks, because it'd be like, I'm gonna say something because I was a crazy kid that literally like did stuff like read the dictionary, and then I would go out there and use words on people, and then they just be like, what is wrong with you? Like, oh, you do, or you think I was the know-it-all,
like you're trying to be
all the
smarter than
stuff.
everybody
And I
else.
was like, well, yeah, that's why you do this, right? Like
that is her now.
that's
Actually.
Also accurate.
but so I would start thinking like, hey, like what is their problem? I mean, it's not my fault you don't want to learn stuff, but
Yeah.
but what I couldn't see, number one, that I could come off slightly obnoxious.
Obnoxious,
Yeah,
probably
and not, but it
pretentious or
wasn't
something.
from a place of trying to make people feel bad or
Yeah,
trying to
or
make
try to
people
make
feel
you
like
feel
I was smart.
I'm bigger
It
or
was just
smarter
like
than you.
hey, I'm smart. Isn't that great? And
Yeah.
that's not how people are. So this is what we're talking about, self-awareness, because one of the reasons it's important, because it starts everything. Because if
Mhm.
you don't have an idea of what is, I don't like to say off per se, but what is not really going well in terms of how you deal with people, you're
Or
not going to
what's or
move
it's
on
not
to
typical.
the next things in terms of what you need to do for yourself even. So I got to do my old lady thing, y'all. Put my
Got to put
reading,
on your
my
Adam
little
my
reading,
glasses.
my
They're
reading
hip, so it's
glasses.
okay.
So let's start with this because we got some components of it, but
Mhm.
just in the sense of the first thing is what?
So the first thing, this is all about self awareness, self acceptance, and self love. First thing is self awareness. So, explain more what self
Right.
awareness is.
So self-awareness, in definition,
Mhm.
is our ability to perceive and understand the things that make us who we are as an individual, which includes our personality, actions, our beliefs, our emotions, and our thoughts. Now, essentially, it is a psychological state in which the self becomes the focus of attention. So basically, it's like paying attention to yourself
Yeah.
and noticing how what you're doing, not doing, how you're reacting is affected by people or affects people or anything in your environment, because sometimes we're just going along, we're just doing, and we don't really recognize things until later. We're like, well, why are people being like this toward me,
Yeah.
so that's the biggest thing.
So what makes the self awareness part so important?
Well, there's a lot of reasons. So, of course, I have a few things now, but
Mhm.
I mean, it's important, because first of all, when we look inward at ourselves, it will give us clarity on how we think about things, this our value system and all that. So like what's important to me?
Mhm.
What do I feel strongly about? Or, where will I stand up for something? This is who
Mhm.
I am in that way. So that's important to know about ourselves, because when we come to situations, then we can kind of say, okay, let me kind of gauge how I should
Yeah.
behave in this situation. If you're not aware, you're just going to be like, I'm just being me in this situation, no matter what. And, people get in big trouble at times.
Yeah.
And then it also helps us to make better decisions because we can trust ourselves. And that's
Mhm.
hard to do, especially when you're neurodivergent. You tend to find out when you start being more aware, it's like, gosh, I have not been trustworthy and I've kind of messed up in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
It also helps us to regulate our emotions better. So, because we got to be thinking about it, we got to put ourselves in the situation hypothetically and
Yeah.
say, hey, okay, this might happen, or I'm going to this place, or I'm going to be doing this thing.
Mhm.
Just be prepared, get yourself in the right frame of mind. And then it helps us to accept ourselves, which is important. And this is in no particular order, just so you know. I just said, kind of put it together. And then it helps us develop methods and
Mhm.
strategies that may differ from what we call neurotypical.
Mhm.
So, whereas the term that's not medical, like being neurodiverse, there's neurotypical, which would be everyone else.
Mhm.
And so we have subscribed to neurotypical standards. Let's say on how to do things, how to
Yeah.
do a thing, and everybody says you do this such and such way, and you not knowing any better because you don't know you're neurodiverse or whatever, you're like, oh yeah, supposed to do this way. And then you keep trying to do it that way. And
Yeah.
you keep trying to do it that way. And you can't do it that way. And then you start what? You start going internal. You start beating
Mhm.
yourself up. And you're like, something must be wrong with me because I can't do this thing. Where developing, understanding that about yourself, then you start developing the strategies and methods that you might be able to get the same result,
Mhm.
but the way you do it may be totally different and it's not
Yeah.
wrong.
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And I know that's one thing that I know you've struggled
Mhm.
with that, because always feeling like, well, other people can do this, that, or the other
Yeah.
in this way.
Definitely.
And I don't know why I can't,
Yeah.
and you got to be able to say, it is okay if I can't do it that way. But guess what? I can do it in another way.
It actually took a lot for me to get to a point where it was like, well, at a certain point, well, realizing that I'm doing things way different and it's not working. I'm trying to do what everybody else is doing, and I'm not getting the same results. And it took me a while. It took a lot of beating myself up initially. My esteem was low. It's like I'm never going to be able to do this
Right.
like they do it.
Right.
Even they make it look so
And still
good. They make it
thinking you
look so
need to is the
easy.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then I figured I'm like, especially as you get older and you realize, not only being neurodivergent is one thing, but then the fact that everybody's just winging shit and making things look good.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and and that can
That's
be,
another thing.
from this perspective, it looks like you have no problem doing it,
Right.
but then I don't realize the other things that they're missing out on or
Right.
not doing right because they're making one part of their life look like they've got it all together.
Right. And there may be situations where that's just in their wheelhouse and they're able to do that. So that's the most important thing, is getting to that place of understanding, like, just because I can't do it that way doesn't mean I can't do the thing. It's not at all
Yeah.
inclusive. So, and then there's also, in terms of why it's important, it also helps us to practice um, self-compassion. and
Mhm.
and so that's, and
Yeah.
it's a, because again, about the beating yourself up
Yeah.
because you can't do things a certain way. So that's just
I
um
did want to add to that list. I
yeah.
wrote a whole pros and cons list, basically, with self-awareness, all those
Right.
things, you're mindful of your emotions, and with awareness you can reduce like stigmas
True.
and misconceptions that other people have of you. If you're aware and you're able to tell, like, with our family member who has autism, how, I was letting her know, if you don't want to tell people, oh, I have autism,
Right.
sometimes it's okay to just say, I'm not really good at understanding
Right.
things,
Or I process things
or I
differently.
process things a little
Yeah.
differently. So you have to be very clear and concise.
Right.
And that's something I do because, I don't have no official diagnosis with anything, but
Yeah.
I do know that I do have a hard time receiving certain information and retaining information and things like that. And so I try to make it clear with people, like, be clear with me, be
Right.
straightforward.
I'm not I'm not good with sarcasm. Yeah.
No, for real. For real. And they'll be like, I'm joking. I'll be like,
Right.
especially when it's your boss. Like, don't joke with me.
Yeah,
Don't be joking with
I don't
me.
joke with the higher ups.
Right.
Yeah.
You're
I'm like,
saying
that's
stuff
not a
is
funny
like,
joke.
you kidding, right? Yeah.
Don't joke about people getting let go. It's not funny.
Right.
Right, we're gonna have to downside soon. Nudge, nudge.
Or we need you in the office right now. I'm like, uh-oh.
Bob, stop it. But yeah, another thing that comes, well, learning to have self compassion, like learning to be patient with yourself
Yeah.
and love yourself. And it took me a long time to get there because it felt like, because no matter what I do it wrong. It was hard
Right.
to love myself. I
Right.
was like, I'm
Right.
never gonna get anything right,
Right. No,
but I've learned to be
absolutely.
patient with myself, and I have had little successes
Right.
and overcome some things that I never thought I would, because
Yeah.
I've become aware, like, okay, maybe that's not my strength.
Right. And then
I'm
sometimes it gets to that. Sometimes it's just knowing that you do things differently. Sometimes it's knowing that maybe that's not for me. And that's an okay thing. Everything
Yeah.
is not for everybody, and that's okay. And
Yeah.
that's what we want people to understand, because you don't have to conform to something to be okay. And it's what the outside world will make you feel a lot of times, because it's like, well, this is what the norm is.
Mhm.
And that's what we struggle with. So the self-awareness helps us to understand it, helps us to now accept.
Mhm.
And self-acceptance is kind of like that next piece after the
Well, I
self-awareness.
wasn't finished,
Well,
lady.
go ahead. I'm just like, well, you mentioned certain things, but go
No, no,
ahead.
no, I know, but I wanted to do the other side of things and help people understand why it could be so bad to not ever try and become aware of things
Mhm.
about yourself,
Right.
self-aware and things like that. And I wrote a few things down because I think it's really important. I think a lot of people experience these kind of things, like, you know, you when you try to operate the way you think other people are operating, and then you feel yourself falling short of expectations or your hopes and things like that, and the disappointment that comes with that,
Mhm.
and that feeling when you don't ever become aware of the fact that you don't have to do or live how everybody else lives
Right.
to be successful, quote
Absolutely.
unquote, and that's when people end up going, for me, like, kind of beating myself up. That's what
Right.
happens, and hitting the same problems and not
Right.
solving it differently. And then on the other side of things, somebody else, uh it'll cause more misunderstandings and
Oh yeah.
misconceptions,
Oh
because they're
gosh,
like, they're
yes.
just like this, like, or they look at you like you're untrustworthy, like
Right.
you're late today.
Right.
We're gonna say
Whatever.
we're gonna say it was the time blindness, but but you do have a real excuse. Honestly, it does. Blindness is a real thing with
Yeah.
ADHD. We'll get more into it. But
Another episode.
other things are, and it's things that I've experienced, me personally, is acting out on my anger and
Mhm.
my other strong emotions, and acting and reacting impulsively,
Right.
and then followed by feelings of like deep regret, and those things I
And
would
back to
feel.
beating yourself up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and those things I would feel constantly, and I think it's really important for people to be aware, because they don't see themselves in that same cycle of doing that. Oh, I tried to do this, and then I started exploding, and then
Right.
this happened again, and it's always happening, boop boop boop, and it keeps happening. But that's why being self-aware and knowing what you can do
Right.
in a situation and not what anybody else can do for
Right.
you is important. So I try to be very aware for that reason,
Yeah.
because you can't change everything on the outside, and that's a big thing about self-awareness, is being aware of you
Right.
and how you handle things, because you can be aware of things
Yes,
around
of
you,
course. So
but
you
you
learn how to
cannot.
control certain things too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yep.
absolutely.
Which, well, hand in hand with self acceptance,
Right.
learning to accept the things that are um good and bad and indifferent about yourself,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and
It's just like if you can accept what it is, then you can work with yourself. Is the
Mhm.
bottom line. It's like, but when you are like, no, I'm gonna keep trying to do it this way because everybody says I need to, and I want to be like everybody else. I can do this, but then you got that's that cycle and it
Mhm.
just starts beating up. So it's very important once again. So when we talk about um so first of all, also
Mhm.
I wanted to talk about how we develop it, the self-awareness. So how do we get that even when we just have a very small inkling of what that is.
Mhm.
So again, back to the glasses. Um,
Mhm.
so first of all, we have to identify our strengths and weaknesses.
Mhm.
Um, because again, being aware of that as opposed to saying, no, I should be able to do this, that it's like it's something you ain't good at everything, and that's okay. No,
Yeah.
nor is anyone else.
A
That's
lot
the
of
part.
seeing, like, especially seeing people that I went to school with and stuff like that. And
Right.
after we got out of high school, and then I see them, they're going to college, holding down not only one job but two jobs, and I'm
Yeah,
like,
doing the most.
and it's like I would love to have that in me because I am a hard worker.
Right.
I really am, and I used to think I'm not. I'm lazy because that's what people made me think, you know. But
Right.
that's not the case. I would not be able to function like other people like that way. I wouldn't be able to graduate college because
Right.
I personally can't get my focus to be in all places at once. And that's one way I learned to accept that, you know, I'm going to try and do what I can right now. And it may not look as successful or hardworking as the next person
Right.
because maybe they
Right.
can do it all.
Or maybe they can't,
or
but they know how to make it look
or
good.
man, or they're doing it all on the outside and
Right.
their house look tore up and they don't do their laundry and they be wearing dirty underwear.
So let me ask a question.
Okay.
Has How has self-awareness helped you to improve the things you're self-aware about?
Oh, that's a good one.
Hold on. Felt kind of like paradoxical a little bit.
Well, like you guys are
I got
talking
it.
about being self-aware of some of the things that you do or some things that you may have issues with. So it's like, let's say if one of those things is being late, has self-awareness helped contribute to maybe working on that on like how can you,
Right.
knowing who you are and what your shortcomings are, make it so that you can work on those things? Is that something that
That's
you know
where the
So,
strategies come in.
yeah.
So using said example, today notwithstanding, the lateness thing, okay, because it's a struggle, it's a real one, and it's based on some real stuff. That's called, it's nicknamed time blindness. That's not what it is, but it's basically the ability or the lack of ability to really understand time and how it relates to what you're doing. Like for me, what I didn't know is I didn't understand how long certain things would take. So I could say, "Oh, can you do?" Somebody say, "Can you do this, this, and this?" And I'm like, "Oh, I got this to do this. Oh yeah, I can go ahead and do that too. I'll do that on the way to this or whatever." And it's like, okay, that sounds good. And then when you have to translate it into real action, it's like all of a sudden it's like, why am I so far behind on this thing? Because I didn't take a whole lot of things into consideration. There are little minutiae, I like to call them, that you have to take into
Yeah.
consideration. So, like
Yeah.
for me, an example, when I used to work the early schedule that I worked, which was 5:30 in the morning, and what I realized is there was a parking issue. And what I had to realize, it wasn't me figuring out what time I had to get there because that still wouldn't give me a good deadline for getting myself out. I had to realize I need to have a bottom line when I need to be out the door.
Mm-hmm.
So when I do that, I know getting out the door is going to get me where I need to be at the time where I don't have any problem. And that's what I started doing. So no matter what, I have to be out the door by boom time. And that was the
Mm-hmm.
only way. And I have to do that with everything. It's like, okay, decide what needs to happen before you leave and then how long you need. So when do you need to leave?
Yeah.
So that's a strategy.
Yeah.
And so that's one way. It's like understanding it or understanding that you don't understand. So you got to figure out how you compensate for it.
Yeah.
So that's basically what that is.
I'm gonna give
Good
like
question.
not a neurodiverse example, but I'm gonna give an example of something I learned to do for myself. When I wake up in the mornings for work, I have to have at least 5 alarms because the first
Oh, that's a
alarm,
strategy.
um,
You laughing.
I'd be like, all right, I'm gonna get up in five
They annoy me.
minutes. Boop.
Alarms are annoying.
And and then it's like I don't want to be that person, especially at work. And I know those people who are just perpetually late to work. Oh, I woke up late. Oh, I woke up late. I don't want to be that person. So I make sure when that first alarm goes off, I'd be like, yeah, I'm gonna get up. And I really do believe myself too. And then I'd be like, thank God for that second alarm. And I'd be like, all right, 5 more minutes, I'm gonna get up. So I'm like, I'm aware of what I do. I'm aware that I believe or the whole the putting things in a safe place thing. I'd be like, this is a safe place to put this. I'm never gonna forget. But now I'm aware of it. So now when I hear myself say that in my head, I'd be like, don't do it. Don't do it. Just leave it out.
Yeah.
Just leave it
So
out.
that's a good question because and that's the thing. And that's what I'm saying. It's like we develop that self-awareness and the actions. So there are things we can do. We can keep a journal because that also helps us to recall stuff. Ask others how they see us. Like what do you think about such and such and such? Don't ask him because he gone.
I hate asking that question.
Looking like
You know what's the worst? Asking somebody who's brutally honest something, and then they tell you, and you're like, okay.
So I have a question.
That's
right?
you.
I have a question. So I know, like, since we're like giving examples of just like how we manage your time or
Right.
whatever. So for me, waking up is easy. Getting out of bed is hard. And
That's true.
So
That's true.
I've never really paid too much attention to it.
Right.
But one thing I know that I do now is my alarm goes off at 3:30. I don't have
Right.
to be to work till 6.
Right.
But my alarm goes off at 3:30. I get out of bed by 3:45. And because I don't like rushing out the door,
Yes.
I will be done with everything I need to be done with by like 4:15. And then I'll just sit there. I'll probably watch something, play a game. Like,
Yeah.
does that count as like a solution to?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that's a strategy because it works. So you're not gonna be.
I know when I
late.
have my coffee in the morning.
I'm never late.
So I give myself the extra 30 minutes to come here and drink my mom's coffee.
Out of my cups.
Okay. So then other thing, okay, I just said ask other people, but also determine
those glasses.
Shut up. Determine what our true core values are. That's one way because once we, that's how we can develop it. Just thinking about that. Examine our off the cuff reactions. Like what things, it's like, gosh, you tend to, but to ourselves though. Okay, I know I tend to. If somebody says something, I feel defensive or whatever it is.
Yeah.
You got to be aware of that.
One, and I know because I know I had it bad before. I still have it bad a little bit, but I'm definitely a lot better. Like, that when even though somebody like can say something truthful, it can hurt. That is the truth.
Ooh.
Why are you laughing?
No, because she said core value that I haven't been able to stop thinking about Kurt Angle.
Why?
Because his core value, because he's always like the 3 eyes.
Oh my
intensity,
God.
integrity, intelligence, and it just
oh
popped in my
my
head.
Gosh.
And I haven't been able to stop laughing.
What's wrong with you?
Everything is a wrestling. And then prayer, obviously.
Oh yeah,
that's huge. Just in a personal level, but it's a huge thing, because I don't know. I can't do it on my own. And so I have to give stuff up. And then we practice mindfulness, getting time with yourself and just allowing yourself. Now, that's a tricky one, I'm gonna say, because like people talking about like, okay, meditating. Let me just say this. That is very hard for a lot of people with ADHD in particular. It is like I can't make myself like, oh, let's just be still, and I can't. I'm
No.
like, my mind is
you-
going this way.
yeah, that's
I
what it
got so much
is.
to do.
I be
Yeah.
trying to close my. They be like, clear your mind. What the hell does that mean? How am I supposed
I
to
don't
clear
know
my
how.
mind?
It's like, well, now I'm thinking about clearing my mind.
Added to all the other things I'm thinking about.
How does one do this?
And
No,
then
for real.
it's also said one of the things, real simple, but be humble. Because it's like sometimes we think we know ourselves, and then somebody tells us something like
The way
you.
she said it too.
Yeah. Well, because I know, I can be, to be like, no,
Well, I was
shut up.
thinking of a song.
Be humble.
Yeah, I
That
Sit
thing,
down.
who said it?
But no, so wait, back to what I was saying. Like honestly, like I would get offended at somebody just telling the truth. Like, okay, well, sometimes you do this, and I'd be like, no, I don't.
was get
No,
all
I
extra.
didn't. And it's like there's no reason to be offended if somebody.
Yeah.
Well, first of all,
If they're coming from a, yeah,
the intentions of somebody coming up to
Yeah.
you and telling you, "Hey, I noticed this," and it's kind of making people feel uncomfortable. You
Right.
know what I mean? How can you not respect that?
Right.
And I
because
know
you're not ready.
Yeah, but when you're aware, you're like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I start thinking back. I'd be having like, I don't know why, but I look at things from an aerial view of situations when somebody tells me something, and I'd be like, okay, I can see how that looked a little,
Or
mean,
could.
a little awkward.
Yeah.
I also think like a big part of that is understanding that you can't always see the things the way other people see them. So
Yes.
it's hard. Like if somebody tells you, hey, this is kind of what you did or doing, instead of
Right.
thinking, well, I know I didn't do that.
Right.
Just
Yeah.
saying like, well, it's possible
Could
that
it?
I can see how
out
you
on
could
the
have
outside,
seen it that
like
way.
even if you don't believe it, you did it that way. Sometimes
Absolutely.
you have to see like maybe they don't see it that way. So
Right.
That's why I clear things up with people. I'd be like, you know what? I feel like I understand why it came off that way to you, but that definitely was not my intentions, And
Right.
I like to use that word because, intentions for me are very important,
well, I think that's important in general, is just
Yeah.
stating your intentions, because whether like your intentions may not have been what happened. Like you can't always tell people how they feel about what you've done,
Right.
but you can at least try and say, I that's not what I was
That
intending.
wasn't the intention.
My bad. That's on
Right.
me. Whatever it is.
But to say for future, I will try to take that into consideration.
Yeah.
And that's funny because that brought me to the one, and that was the thing about viewing things from various perspectives.
Yeah.
So because we truly, in a natural sense, come from our own perspective. That's just what it is, right? We see things the way we see them. So to consider, like, could that have, come off that way? Could that have looked that way or anything like that? And it's like, maybe there is a possibility.
Yeah.
And that's hard. That goes into the humble thing, because it's hard sometimes, because it's like,
I'm
no. Yeah, exactly.
Be acting all extra offensive.
So
I don't have that problem.
no, not at all. Anyway.
we're not gonna go into that one.
So here's the thing. So we want to talk about what self-acceptance, what it is in a nutshell, is the ability to accept yourself in all aspects of who you are, including your strengths and weaknesses, without judgment. That's huge.
Bruh. Okay, look. I accept myself.
It's the without judgment part.
I accept myself, but
Right.
I'm gonna be honest. I judge myself.
Yeah.
24/7. I'd be like,
oh shit, you scared me, man.
I'd be like, Jonna, that wasn't your best interaction. That was.
And then it's gonna follow you the rest of the day. Wake up in the morning like, I've had better. It's like, oh, it's the worst.
Yeah,
but
I'm going to accept. Okay,
yeah,
there's gonna be a lot more of those.
Yeah. So here are some of the characteristics. I keep trying to do this without straining myself. Okay, so of self-acceptance: seeing ourselves fairly and accurately, embracing all parts of ourselves, having a positive attitude towards ourselves. It takes work sometimes. Letting go of things we cannot change.
Oh, let me add something really quick.
Yeah.
Because that's something we were talking about earlier this week about the person I know, and about toxic positivity.
Mm-hmm.
Self-acceptance doesn't mean that. Self-love, trying to be happy doesn't mean oh, I'm fine while
I'm
you're
great.
burning on the inside.
Yeah.
Self-acceptance is being honest with yourself.
Right.
Recognizing your strengths, your weaknesses, when you're not feeling your best.
Right.
When you're
And that was one of them, and identifying the strengths. Being kind to ourselves is also important. So why again is it important? improves our overall mental well-being for sure, because now we're not tussling with like, oh gosh, why am I like this, or whatever the case may be. It helps us be ourselves, so now we don't have to mask, because it's like, hey, I am who I am. I'm going to try to be mindful of things, but I still am who I am. And then it helps us understand ourselves and why we do what we do. And it can give us more self-confidence, therefore making us less vulnerable to judgment and criticism, because people are always going to have something to say, or just, they might not mean to be a certain way. And then the self
Love.
the self what was the first
Acceptance.
word?
Mm-hmm.
Self
Awareness.
thank you.
Goodness gracious.
I swear it went away.
So the whole
It
episode is
blanked.
about
Right. Self-awareness and the self-acceptance. This is the ultimate. It leads to what we would say, most people call it self-love, but it's self-compassion.
Yeah.
So what self-compassion is the practice of being kind and understanding to ourselves, even when we feel inadequate or feel that we are failing in some capacity. So we can practice that. And just for some tips, just to get it out there, allowing ourselves to be imperfect, fallible, and human, because we are. Be kind and forgiving towards ourselves. Take walks frequently. It helps to clear the mind. Rest when needed. Oof, that's for me. Um, take breaks from strenuous tasks, events, and situations. So it's not bad sometimes when you don't want to do that super socializing. Sometimes you just have to
I
recharge.
used to force myself.
Yeah.
And be crying after
Yeah.
after a long socializing situation. But I realized it's not for me like everybody else to go out every week and
Right.
do things like that. So every once in a while is fine because I do want human interaction. But
Absolutely.
I'm aware that I can't handle it.
You can't do right, and that's okay.
And that's okay.
And then we have to allow ourselves to experience emotions without judgment, because that's another thing. We want to hide that. They're like, I don't know, I'm not crying. Like, no, I feel sad about this. I feel angry. I feel betrayed. Whatever it is,
And that goes
just don't
along
stay
with
there.
the toxic
Yeah.
positivity. And how I was letting that guy know, like,
Right.
you don't just be happy, happy, happy. It's okay to feel sadness. It's okay to feel anger. It's okay
Because
to
it's
feel
real.
upset.
It's what it is.
Yeah, just don't let it consume you.
That's it. And then we have to give ourselves credit when we have accomplished something we set out to do, because even if it's small, because that helps us, because especially with ADHD, it's about getting things. Sometimes it's hard about to get things done.
Yeah.
And that's a thing. And so when we get something, it's like, go ahead and cheerlead yourself a little bit. And then practice again the mindfulness, with, in this case, pray, meditate, listen to ourselves. And now the reason it's important, again, mental well-being, it will increase motivation, because if you are feeling good about yourself, it'll make you do a little more. That gives that dopamine
Not
you
only
need.
that, well, do what you would do for somebody else you care about. Treat yourself how you would treat somebody else. Oh,
Yes.
you know what? You're not ugly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do the same thing to yourself. I did it to you.
Not you're not ugly. I thank you. I appreciate that.
But what you would do to somebody else, do that
Yeah.
to yourself. You know what? I gotta take it easy on myself.
Yeah.
Like, I did do good. I tried my best. It may have not come out the way I wanted it to, but I did my best, and I'm proud of that.
Absolutely. And then it also can contribute to better decision making, and can lead us to have a more stable sense of self-worth. So all of that is just so impactful to how we are able to operate in the world. This is before you receive a diagnosis of any sort. If you don't know, it's not even going to lead you, because you're going to say, okay, now I need to do something major, or I need some help. I need some treatment. And that's when you'll do that, because it's like, I want to be healthy.
Yeah.
And that's what's going to lead you to put forth the effort. So we got to start with being aware, and just starting to understand where we stand in certain situations. And if it's okay, is this okay? Did I react okay? Did and then if I didn't, and you don't know, like, but I don't know why I do that, or I don't know how to stop it. So now what? And that's the what next. And
Well, one thing about awareness, also, I've been aware about myself of how I react with people, like the getting offensive thing when people say something. I've learned to be able to hear something uncomfortable and be like, okay, I heard a piece of information that made me want to go off, but I'm gonna be like, okay, but was it honest? Were they trying to hurt me?
Right.
Was it helpful information? Was it
Right.
something that was brought to my attention that I wouldn't have thought of?
Right. Or you could use.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and so at the end of the day, what we want to do is just expose that our self thinking about ourselves so that we can do better. And then when we need help to do better, we'll seek that help to do better. And that goes back to, remember, we are not professionals.
No.
We are just learning things about ourselves and these conditions, and we want to share, but we also encourage sharing with us, or even things you've experienced, because that's helpful. We want to be a community, but again, be open to checking things out for yourself, and look into these organizations that we'll list, that we always have there for you to look into, just to get some information. And again, at the very least, go see your personal doctor or a psychiatrist and start talking about these symptomatic things and what you're feeling. And but for the most part, it's okay to understand these things about yourself. It doesn't make you a bad person.
And
That's the more
also,
those
if you're
things.
not someone who experiences these things, if you want to be supportive of somebody, it
Yes,
would help to do
to
the
know these
research
things.
about things that are helpful, skills to learn, and ways that
You can
you
support
can,
them.
yeah, you can be helpful and not react in a way that
Right.
would be
Because the worst
destructive.
thing is feeling misunderstood. And I
Mhm.
think that's what anyone wants, but people who are neurodivergent do have trouble with regulating emotions a lot of times. And when people take it offensively, you feel like now you're making other people feel bad. It's just a whole cycle of things. So this is another reason to get more information and also visit these same sites that we will list. But just this is, again, we thank you for joining us on our second
Mhm.
time out here, and we're gonna, as we go, keep trying to get more information and be as genuine as we can. But we hope you'll also participate with us. And other than that, like we said, we are
We're
not
not crazy.
crazy.
That was pretty good.